Welcome to another episode of Social Workers Matter. My name is Dr. Sylvia Smith, and I am your host. And today we have the wonderful Shabazz Graham, who has joined me to have a chat. How are you, Shabazz?
I'm really good, thank you, Sylvia. Really honored to be on your show.
Oh, well, I'm honored to have you. You're doing so many phenomenal things in the creative spaces that you inhabit. So I am so keen to do a deep dive. But first of all, let's start with getting to know a little bit about you and your background. I met you a few months ago. Last year it was in
Yeah,
October time, I think it was. Yeah, I remember that event that we were at, and you were sort of busily filming and doing your thing. And then we had a brief chat, and you sort of virtually introduced me to your wife, Candy, who wasn't at the event at the time, but was majorly involved in some of that work. So perhaps we can touch on that a bit too. But tell us a
sure.
bit about who you are, something of your background. I'm aware of some of it, but just introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. So my name is Shabazz Graham. You'll also see me as Shabazz L Graham. L stands for La Lumba.
Oh, okay.
My mother is a Jamaican, bless her, and she chose a Aramaic first name, Shabazz, which means King of the Birds. A Scottish surname is obviously inherited,
Mhm.
and then an African middle name, La Lumba. I actually, and she basically told me that I was supposed to have been named after a famous African king, which I thought was amazing, but I can't seem to find La Lumba. So if anyone knows who King La Lumba is, let me know.
Oh,
Um,
someone out there's bound to know, or
yeah,
not.
I think she actually was supposed to name me after Lumumba,
Ah,
Patrice Lumumba, the famous I think Congolese or African civil rights leader.
okay,
But
okay.
yeah, I'll take it. So yeah, first name named after Malcolm X, Malik El Shabazz. Middle name after Patrice Lumumba, and then yeah, Graham. So I'm a filmmaker, I'm a social advocate, and I'm a questionologist, the CEO of a new platform called Qcast, which means question cast. I'll probably tell you a little bit about that uh,
Absolutely. Don't think you're going to get away without doing
a
that.
little bit
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
I'm 47 years old. I've been in the film and TV industry for about 30 years. I grew up in care, which is probably why I'm on your show. I was
Mhm.
placed in my first children's home at 9.5 months. I was in the care system all my childhood really. I left when I
Wow.
was 17.
Mhm.
My first children's home was in Tunbridge Wells, Kent. I was there for 9 years.
Wow.
That children's home closed down as a result of scandals in the 80s, and then I had to be moved to a new children's home, which was in Peckham Rye, London,
Okay.
um, and that's where I began to get in kind of. I would say that was a pivotal point in my life where I could have gone
Mhm.
towards a negative trajectory, um, but instead I decided to go in a better one. I was fostered by a Pentecostal pastor,
Mhm.
a pensioner, single
Wow.
mother, who took me and my brother in at, I believe I was 11. And I guess I spent 7 years with her. And
Wow.
that 7 year period changed my life. So if anyone says that foster care doesn't work, they are
You
very
beg to
wrong because
differ. Yeah.
she changed my life. She
Mhm.
absolutely changed the trajectory of my life. God bless her. So she's now no longer with us.
Oh,
But
okay.
but yeah, I have many different chapters and stages of my life, of which the social care system was a huge part. I actually, just to quickly add to that, when I left care at 17, I was placed in my first. I was given a flat
Mhm.
by the care system at 17.
Mhm.
Stayed there for I think close to like 25 years. So I had that I had that flat,
Wow.
yeah, for 25 years. And going
Wow.
into that property, I was contacted by social care because they saw that I was, in their own words, I was a good example of how someone should leave care.
Yeah.
Because I think over my head, I had this kind of like, uh, you know, notion. Everyone was saying that you're either going to end up dead, in prison, or on drugs because of the many influences that were around me at the time, and because of how my life was looking.
Yeah.
But I didn't end up obviously in any of those situations. I instead turned my life around and became hopefully a positive role model to society. And social services offered me my first job, which was to come and facilitate a documentary, a film documentary
Wow.
that was being made about kids in care. And
Wow.
so, and they basically hired someone from the BBC, a gentleman called William Hicklin, another person who I'd really look up to and say I learned so much from. And spending time with William and making that documentary told me what I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I knew that I wanted to
Mm.
get into film. I wanted to help tell stories, and so I became a filmmaker. And I thank the social services for helping me
Wow.
in that
Well,
area.
well, let me pause you there for a minute, Shabazz, because you've given us so much in what probably about 3 minutes. Good gracious. No, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, in terms of your sort of early life and so on, would you have said that even that period where you spent time living in the children's home, how would you summarize that period? Was that positive or negative, or how would you summarize that period?
The To be honest with you, it was all I knew. I
Okay.
thought it was positive. Um, but you know, a child has a great way of just making anything positive, or that, you know, even if a
Mm,
child, for example, is going through situations of being abused. I unfortunately was abused in that children's home by another resident. Um, at the time, I didn't know it was abuse. At the time, I didn't know it was something that should have put a negative cloud over my life.
mm,
But obviously, looking back, it then affected me because I realized how vulnerable I was. But I didn't see anything other than positives while I was there. I was, my mother, I was the youngest of 7 boys. Um,
wow.
5 of us were in that children's home. So I grew up with my brothers in the children's home. It was a situation where my mother, I do believe, traveled abroad and left us with a friend. And I don't know all the ins and outs of it,
Mm,
but I
mm,
think
mm,
something happened that caused the social services to take us from the friend and place us in children's homes. So my mother spent a long time trying to get us back, and unfortunately, that didn't occur. So
mhm,
we spent most of our childhood in children's homes, in that children's home. And yeah, I loved it to begin with because it was a huge, big kind of children's home which had about 30 residents.
it's a big
Some was
playground. Mm,
Yeah, I just saw it
mm,
as being, my house has a big, huge playground. It has a forest connected to it. It has kind of like a big, what is it, play area,
mm,
you know, adventure playground in the yard. And I got a huge black bag of toys at Christmas.
mhm.
That's what I saw the positives in it. I had a very simple
Simple
life.
life, simple life, simple life. Yeah.
I think though, as I grew, I began to realize that I didn't have what other friends at school had, which was a mum and dad come to pick them up. I had
Hmm.
staff, I had social workers, I had key
Mm,
workers, I had these things that replaced what I eventually grew to be, should have been my parents. And so children begin to get educated as they grow. They get socialized, don't they? And as I got
mhm,
socialized, I recognized also that there were different elements that I was missing out on.
mhm,
I also, to add to that, me and my brothers were, I would say, the only people of our ethnic demographic within that children's home. Primarily, there were a few other people with our skin tone, but primarily we were like the main kind of
mhm,
Africans in the,
mhm.
people from the African Caribbean demographic in the whole town. So I'd be walking down the
Wow.
street in Kent, and people would like, see me in a, we were into kind of not body popping, but we dressed like hip hop
Mhm.
rappers at the time. And so you had people looking at us like we were either celebrities, running up to us, asking us to teach them how to break dance. And, you know, if people did get negative to us, I remember, Sylvia, quite vividly, I taught myself to be the best fighter in my school because I didn't want anyone to call me the N word.
Right.
Um, even as a child, I knew that I was different, and people, saw my difference as a threat, or they were fearful, or they were angry, or they were violent, or abusive. So I realized I need to become strong teach myself how to fight
Hmm.
so that they don't take advantage of me. And that, I think, gave me what some psychologists might see as a wrong foundation to build my self-worth on top of, because
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
child shouldn't be thinking that he has to basically defend himself in order to prevent people from calling him
Yeah, it's
the N-word.
yeah, preemptive
And because
strike,
that
so to
can,
speak. Yeah.
yeah, it shaped my personality to begin with.
I mean, there are so many similarities to that way of thinking of things when you are in the minority and you don't want people to take advantage of you, and you can foresee that they possibly would do if you sort of express any level of vulnerability.
Mm.
Um, I guess then that also can be a recipe for um, a kind of a guard being continually up, I would imagine.
Yeah, it basically, you then fall into the stereotype that people
Yes.
have created for you, which is the angry black boy or the
Yeah.
angry black
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was angry, but I guess to some people I was, but they didn't see it as me having this preemptive kind of like
Mm.
this guard and this
Yeah.
shield.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it then led me, unfortunately, to become quite hostile. I got in trouble being quite aggressive in the children's homes, and I think the day that I woke up and realized that I can't be this way was when I got a visit from the police. The police came to the children's home, seeing a policeman at the door to see me,
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
inform me, because I got in trouble with actually, I think, it's to my shame. I hate
Remembering it. Mm.
remembering it or
Mm.
recounting it, but I owe some of the staff in my children's homes a deep apology, because I was aggressive to them
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't able to be aggressive, say, to the older boys that were my brothers. Many times, me and my brothers would fight. I was the youngest of um, seven. I wouldn't win,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh,
so I would find ways to take my anger out, either therefore on staff members or other kids. Like I said, I was a young boy in desperate need for
mm-hmm.
help,
Mm-hmm.
because I was getting ready to release my anger, my vengeance, my wrath on the world. Because as I grew as well, I began to just hate my father. I remember vividly hating the man who I felt, should have been there to take me out of this place.
Mm.
Didn't meet my father properly until I was 25. So I'd left the children's homes and care system. Like I said, I left when I was 17, met him when I was 25.
Wow.
And I had a lot of questions, as you can imagine,
Mm-hmm.
for him.
Mm-hmm. 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 Being the questionologist that you are. I mean, I have heard you speak about this on your platform. Very moving, and I think, you know, for people who after this podcast want to go and explore more about, some of your sort of thoughts and ideas, um, it's pretty engaging stuff, because
Thank
that
you.
could not have been easy. Could not have been easy. So thanks for sharing with us something of your early childhood and some of the challenges that you faced, and some of the insights that you've actually developed as a consequence of thinking back on those times. Take us now through to the placement with your foster parent, and did you move to? Was it only one of your brothers that went to that placement with you, or did the others come as well?
It was only one. So from the first
Okay.
children's home I was in, they, when the children's home was closing down, there was sexual abuse occurring in the children's home, so they had to shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and basically, they split us up as brothers,
Oh,
but they
okay.
kept me with the brother that was the next eldest,
Nearest to your age.
nearer to my age. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And the other three, I think, yeah, went elsewhere, or one, I think, was able to live on his own.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, me and my brother went to, her name was Lillian Francis. Sorry, that was the foster parent. So we went to the other children's home together, first in Peckham, um,
Okay. Okay.
and
Okay.
then spent
Okay.
about a year or two there. And then eventually they moved us into a foster parent's house. Unfortunately, my brother, he only spent about, I would say, about 8 or 9 months there. It
Oh
wasn't
wow.
it, it wasn't for him, and so yeah, he was moved out, and so I was then left alone with the foster parent. I think I was given the choice, do I want to move as well? But I actually had the insight at the time to kind of realize that, yeah, I think this is good for me. I needed the discipline I needed, because she was tough. She wasn't a walkover, and I'm
Hmm.
happy she wasn't, because
Hmm. Hmm.
I think in my first week there, I threatened to my shame again, as a 11 or 12-year-old boy who was taller than her. For some reason, I had this logic that if you were the same height as me, then male, woman, girl, boy, whoever you are, we should be able to fight, and I'm
Hmm.
sure I will beat you. I didn't realize that men weren't supposed to do that and boys weren't
Hmm.
supposed to do that. But she literally stood in my face, and because she wouldn't give me the pocket money that my mother had given to me for her to give to me, she
Hmm.
wouldn't give it to me. I kind of saw that as a threat, and I threatened to beat her up, to my shame.
Hmm.
But she still kept me. She could have easily kicked me out and said, go back to the children's home. But after I realized as I grew that that was wrong, I began to respect her, and I began to
Hmm.
respect this form of discipline. So I do think God bless her for bearing with this troublesome foster kid who really and truly shouldn't have spent more nights in her house than I did. But yeah, it made me love her and respect her.
Yeah, it's
Um,
beautiful.
both my mother and her have passed away, and
Oh,
I I cried at both my mother and my foster mother's funerals, but I was in pieces at my foster mother's funeral, because I just knew how much she had given to me. And there was this
wow.
deep, deep sense of, like, when someone passes and you feel like, I need to be a good person to honor the
Yeah,
passing of this person. And
yeah,
she's
yeah.
left that legacy with me, wanting me to honor her passing by how I live.
That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Okay, so you the other thing I found absolutely amazing was that you spent 25 years living in this accommodation that was sourced for you by
Social
social services.
social
And you
services.
know why prior to sort of my immersing myself more fully in education, I used to be what was called a reviewing officer, an
Okay.
independent reviewing officer for Southwark, in actual fact.
Nice.
Um, and it was so challenging working with particularly young black men as they were about to leave care, because they had such turbulent lives that we half the time didn't know what on earth was going on for them, that there was no way they were going to stay holding down a tenancy for any great length of time. How on earth did you how did you achieve that?
Holding down the tenancy.
Yeah.
Um, I'll be honest with you, it wasn't a walk in the park.
No.
There were times when I was
A
um
little in arrears.
yeah, I didn't arrears became a word I was very familiar with
Yeah,
after a
yes.
while.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's horrible to look back at now, because I think I wish there was more financial literacy taught
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
me, maybe by the social.
And a bit more finance. Let's be honest there.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think yeah, just being taught how to manage that would have helped me. I can't blame the social service obviously altogether. I could have picked up some of that myself. Business studies, school economics, home
Hmm.
economics, those things I really wish I paid more attention. But yeah, I managed to keep it. I managed to stay on board, sometimes with the help of friends, sometimes with just mentors or people. But
Hmm.
yeah, I managed to keep it, and it became, to social services credit, it became a great inheritance that gave me a head start in life at that
Hmm.
stage. So I look back on them, and as much as sometimes people can look back with insults and, they didn't take care
Hmm.
of me, I look back with positive reviews of how I was taken care of. Because not only was I given a flat, um, my first employee, as I said, was social services, because they hired me to facilitate a youth group doing a documentary about kids in care,
Yeah.
of which I featured in it. The actual documentary, if someone wants to look it up, is called Leaving with Care.
Well,
Back
is
in,
it online?
I think it should be. If not,
Mm.
I'll send you a link if
Yes,
anyone wants
please.
wants to
Yeah,
see it.
I can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, and also on top of that, um, yeah, I went on to buy the flat. So
Oh
I actually
wow.
purchased it at a discounted rate because of how long I was there,
Oh
and that
cool.
then became an inheritance to my now family,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
sold that literally just before the pandemic. So
Oh
it
wow.
became a legacy that was good for me in that area. And so there is an example there that if you are giving things, especially when you're leaving care, don't take them for granted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do the best you can with them, because they're you know, I didn't have parents that were able to inherit things to me. I didn't have a business that were given to me, or a house or a
Mm,
home.
mm, mm,
I
mm.
had nothing from both mother and father. That's not to their shame. It's just the way life treated them, and I've been treated by that life.
Mm-hmm.
So being
Mm-hmm.
able to take things, and obviously brick and mortar, even in this day and age of digital technology and all that, brick and mortar will always be one of the best forms of inheritance.
Yes.
Buy a house
Yes.
to your child, or you give it to them, you give them financial stability,
Yeah.
economic wealth. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That's really, really cool. Um, okay. Tell me a little bit about the social workers that you came into contact with. I think some of our listeners, well, many of our listeners who are social workers will benefit greatly from, any feedback that you have on the social workers that you encountered.
I actually would really love, if any of them were still alive or well, I'd really love to meet them again. I should make more effort to try and reach out to them. Eileen, Chris, Kay, my first social workers in Tunbridge Wells, nothing but praise that I have for them in terms of them being
Look
able
how you just
to.
rolled off their names.
Yeah,
Mm, yeah.
they're people in my life who have stayed with me. I bought this. I have this book. This is a book. Yeah, you might not be able to see it
Yeah.
because of the zoom, but this is a book basically, which is like a journal that they were given, that they had to write in every day to tell me what I was doing on specific days of the week.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I've also inherited a journal that my social workers, key workers, and the
Hmm.
staff at the children's home would give to me. And as I grew up and I recognized what I had, I was like, oh my God, these people did a great job in terms of giving me a history that I would never remember, because obviously I was a
Exactly.
child when I was
Exactly.
in
And
there.
I that is an absolute diamond in terms of messages that social workers need to embrace, that these things are so important for young people and for
Yeah,
children who've been looked after in care, because you know who won't have the benefit of family members repeating things
100%.
to them, and so yeah, so that's
And,
that's fantastic.
and something to try and encourage the social workers listening is that you're doing social work not just for the child you have at
Hmm.
present.
Hmm.
You're doing it for the child and the man or the woman that they will become.
Absolutely.
So they will look back at you with better knowledge, insight, and appreciation than the child that you might be
Hmm.
struggling to work
To cope at the time, yeah,
with
yeah,
now.
yeah,
But because as a child, you don't know what you don't know, and
yeah,
I
that's right.
didn't know what this thing was, this social system, this care system, this key worker. As
Hmm.
I grew, obviously, and I wised up, I was like, I kind of get it now. So for example, when so Eileen, Kay, and Chris in my first children's home, all English,
Hmm.
Caucasian people, did the best they could to relate to me and my brothers, especially in uh, what was more of a hostile environment at the
Hmm.
time when it came
Hmm.
to race relations.
Yes.
When I came to London and Peckham, I remember I was given another key worker, a social worker, who looked like Bob Marley. He literally
Okay.
he was called Dave.
Okay.
If you're watching, I'd love to connect with you. He had dreads, a hat, lovely, well-spoken man, very very just mild-tempered, played the guitar.
Hmm.
And obviously I think they did that, the social services did that knowing that, you know, they wanted there to be more of a kind of relatability
Hmm.
in in that space, and I thought that was a good thing. Again, have nothing but praise for Dave. um if you can imagine, to a child who grew up without a father, and especially to boys,
Hmm.
and I know
Hmm.
that there's a lot of talk at the moment about the gender, and the way in which certain gender roles and stereotypes
Yeah.
are placed on. I still feel that boys need good male role models to look up to, especially
Hmm.
if they don't have a father. I do think there are I believe that there is compatibility, or there is more so complementarianism, that
Hmm.
male and women bring to a child. A man can bring something that a woman can't. A woman can bring something that a man can't. And to a child, I think you need a bit of both. And I remember not having, like, for example, I couldn't put my fists up to Dave and think that I'm stronger than you, because he wouldn't have it, because I'm, you know, he's a bigger man than me, and he would actually treat me like a father rather than a mother, and it disciplined me in a way that a woman couldn't. And I saw the balance and the way in which the social workers, different types of workers and different types of staff were able to treat me, you know, using their own gender, using their own different types of modes of working with children perfectly well. There was compatibility and complementarianism, a male complementing the women, women complementing the men. And so, yeah, I think they specifically, knowing that I was a troubled boy, fighting a lot of the times, needing a little bit more of that kind of like father figure, I think they gave me Dave as a social worker that was able to help bring some of that discipline and stability in a way that a woman couldn't. A woman brought certain types of discipline, but not in a way that this social worker at that specific time in my life brought for me, you know?
Okay, well, thanks for that. I mean, obviously that is absolutely your lived experience, and
It's my lived
we,
experience, yeah.
yeah, we honor that absolutely. Okay, so you sort of spend years in your own place. You begin to form yourself as an adult. In terms of your sort of your own personal growth, you start your own family.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? And bear in mind that I know your wife, Candy, so watch what you say.
Yeah, of course. I have nothing but
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
nothing but good things. No, I appreciate it. I basically, yeah, I got married quite late in life, I would say, a year before I turned 40.
Oh wow.
To a fabulous woman who I'm very blessed and happy to call my wife, Miss Candy Ellie Graham. We have now a beautiful little boy, a little baby boy, 4 years old, nearly 5, going on 15.
He runs
But
things, in other words. Yeah.
he's getting. But you know what the beautiful thing is, Sylvia. I'm seeing. I'm an intentional parent, knowing the things that I didn't have as a child that I wanted and needed, especially in the developmental years of,
Yes.
you know, 1 to 5. It's a very important stage. I'm able to give to him with a sense of appreciation that I didn't have it. So I feel informed to give him, you know, affection, affirmation, you know, respect, you know, getting down on his level and listening to his questions, despite how bizarre they are. He told me the other day that he wants to be, what do you want to be when you get older? I want to be a Spider-Man policeman engineer.
That's such a great
I'm
combination.
like, that sounds like a great role. You know what I mean? But it's like, how do I shape that, you know, in terms of, you know, Spider-Man doesn't exist, but maybe you're saying you do want to help people. That's what a policeman does. And then he's so creative. And yeah, so a lot of my upbringing and my own failures or failings by the society or the world that I was born into, circumstances, have informed me to appreciate not even just my child, but also my marriage and also my wife, because there's a way that, you know, I think in life, especially growing up, if you have a negative experience, you get to a fork in the road where you can perpetuate that negative experience and become, you know, an abused can become an abuser. Or you go to the other side of the fork in the road and you say, I'm going to actually help my society. I'm going to take my negative and turn it into fuel. You know, you can take pain and turn it into power. That's one of my beliefs. And you know, that power can go on to offer society a social good. You can offer social purpose and social impact. Hence the reason why people might get into social work, because they might have come out of you know, an experience where they realize and recognize that young people need help. They need the support that I can offer, and I commend people for doing that, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, actually, I want to take a slight step back. Thanks for sharing what you did about your family and parenthood. Gosh, there's so much here. Presumably, you know, your sort of passions around and your creativity which you demonstrate through your film making and other activities. Tell us a bit about how that. Tell us a bit more about how that sort of started, because you said that you were employed quite early on by social services to sort of make a film or make a documentary. But how did you realize that you were creative?
Good question. Great question. Well, I actually sketched in the children's homes. I was always a sketcher and an
Okay.
artist.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, one of my other brothers, I think he was the first person I ever saw do drawing. Most of my brothers actually started off quite creative. Number of them gave it up, but
Okay.
I saw them, picked it up, and most boys want to become like their dads or their older brothers or, you know, older siblings.
Hmm.
And I naturally wanted to become like my brother in terms of drawing. I actually have a picture in one of my books of my first children's home's bedrooms. I did a bird's eye view of it, drawing where my
Okay.
bed was, where my dinosaur collection was. And I look back at that now and I was like, even at like 5 or 6, I was destined towards doing something creative if I held on to it.
Hmm.
Um, and so I remember growing up, probably, yeah, even before I met the filmmaker when I was 17 and began working for social services to do this documentary,
Hmm.
I wanted to be a comic artist. I took my
Oh wow.
sketching and I turned it into, you know, me wanting to basically draw comics, and I draw Wolverine and Spider-Man, all these Marvel
Hmm.
films that we're seeing now. I was drawing those characters when I was a kid. I've got letters that I wrote to Stan Lee in New York asking him if I can come and work for him.
Hmm.
I met a group of friends, Richard and Michael, when I was about 17 as well. We started up a comic called End Time Comics. Sorry, someone was just trying to call me.
Hmm.
Um, and we started to put comics into independent comic shops
Oh
um,
wow.
of our drawings. That's how deep I got. And I stayed wanting to be a comic artist even up into my 20s. But I recognized that there was synchronicity between. Oh, sorry, someone's just trying to call. I recognized that the film industry needed artists, and artistry could complement the film industry.
Hmm.
Because my first job outside of my first job for the BBC, I went on to work for the BBC probably at about 18, 19.
Oh wow.
I
Okay.
went in as a storyboard artist for a promo
Okay.
that was being done by, I think it was Professor Robert, someone, the gentleman with the big moustache. He's like a David Attenborough. Um,
Oh, okay. Is he the one who
y-
does the thing on children? And
yes,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I can't remember his surname, but yeah.
So I basically realized I was creative in that I had the ability to imagine something and had the power to get it onto paper,
Hmm.
which was a power in and of itself. And I think when I got into filmmaking, I just not replaced, but I took the pencil and I augmented it with a camera. And I realized I can
Okay.
do the same with a camera that I did with a pencil. If I filmed things and then edited it in a way, I could tell a story. And
Hmm.
that's what I think William Hicklin, the BBC producer that social services hired to do the documentary, that's one of the things. I would see him as like one of my first mentors. He kind of taught me the power of what that looked like. And I realized that we could shape narratives and therefore tell stories and change people's lives by being creative with a camera.
Yeah, yeah. I absolutely agree with that. Definitely. I think it's such a powerful medium. Um, so what has your work life looked like?
I I went good question. So I basically, from working on that documentary when I was 17, I basically, and interestingly enough, I forgot to say this as well. I was going to say this earlier. So not only did I get paid by social services financially with money, and they gave me a house, they actually gave me all the camera equipment that
Oh,
was
wow.
bought to do the documentary.
Lovely.
I used to keep it at my house for a number of years whilst we went on to make a couple of documentaries or different projects, and it eventually just stayed at my house. And then I think one job, they basically said, if you do this job, you can just keep all the equipment.
Oh,
And I was
lovely.
like, I really appreciated that. And I
Hmm.
basically, I turned then into a wedding videographer. I said, if I could teach, here's a way I could teach myself documentary filmmaking by doing something that I cannot stop, because a wedding is something you cannot stop, even,
That's right.
and you can't like, excuse me, could you say I do again a bit louder? So I taught myself documentary filmmaking even more by doing weddings, christenings,
Hmm.
funerals, anything that moved, I shot. And
Hmm.
therefore, I mentor and I get into youth work now, and I always tell kids initiative can be one of the most powerful things that you offer any employer. Use your initiative. Just
Hmm.
be a do-gooder. Sorry, be a go-getter and get up and go and
Yeah,
do things
I'm
without
proactive.
being be
Hmm.
proactive.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the more I was proactive at that stage, shooting concerts. I was in the church at the time. My foster mother introduced me to faith, and I became a Christian.
Hmm.
So it brought me into the church circle, and the church circle, on a practical level, offers a lot of areas of mentorship where you can learn
Yes.
to be a sound engineer or a cameraman, and so the church gave me a platform by which to shoot as much as I could,
Hmm.
it built a show reel for me, and eventually different people saw my show reel, and the next thing I was introduced to a producer at the BBC called Patrick Campbell, who brought me to do storyboards in the BBC.
Hmm.
A friend of mine then brought me to MTV. I managed to get a job at MTV, and I
Oh,
went on
wow.
to be a producer at MTV, shooting and traveling all around Africa, because I was a part of MTV based Africa.
Wow.
Every month we would go to Africa and shoot a different concert in different parts of different countries within Africa. From MTV, I went to Nickelodeon. I began to edit children's
Wow,
cartoons,
how
and
exciting.
and then it
Hmm.
just moved from there. Worked for Channel 4, went on to work for other established companies. But yeah, eventually got a job as a manager for a production company called Salt TV for 4 years, where I was placed as a manager in the post-production area. And I think, Sylvia, overall, I just really had a desire to always just perfect my skill, knowing the odds that were set against me, because there
Hmm.
has been a
Hmm.
number of challenges when it
Challenges,
comes
yeah.
to demographic and diversity and
Hmm.
inclusion.
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
always realized I needed to exceed expectation and be a person who could have a good conversation, because a lot of the industry, here's a secret to those that are watching, a lot of the industry, it's all about soft skills.
Yeah.
Soft
Yeah.
skills before it is just hard skills. Rather than you going in thinking I'm the best cameraman and I'm the best editor, if you can't have a conversation
Or a
um,
relationship. Yeah.
or a relationship with
Hmm.
the producer who you're editing with, you won't get another job.
Hmm.
You need to be
Hmm.
able to relate and just be able to, just have small talk sometimes, as opposed to
Charm, I think they call it.
charm.
Shabazz.
Yeah,
Charm,
that's
charm.
that kind of stuff. That's a level of creativity as well. Being creative with just having a good,
Yeah.
bit of narrative and banter.
Yeah. No, no, that sounds super. You're gonna write a book at some point, aren't you? I'm sure.
I think I should. People keep
Yeah,
telling
yeah,
me I
yeah, yeah.
should.
You should, man. You should, you should, you should.
Thank you.
There's an absolute story there. I mean, time is kind of always against us in some of these conversations, and I hope at some future point we can reconnect and to talk more about some of your wisdoms that you've accumulated over the years. But
I'd love that.
bring us to this point now. You're the background for those of you who are watching. The background of Shabazz's screen.
Quite subtle, right?
Um, he is the creator of something called Qcast. Well, he along with others, I should imagine. But tell us a bit about what on earth is Qcast?
Thank you very much. So yeah, Qcast basically is a new social media platform and communication tool. It's a digital platform that I created about 3 years ago. It means question cast. The power of questions are, is unquestionable.
Mm-hmm,
we
mm-hmm.
I'm speaking now because I'm responding to a question that you've asked. Most of our conversations, most of the podcasts we listen to, or the interviews, are all questions. There's a saying that says, behind every breakthrough there is a better question.
Mm-hmm.
Every innovation known to man has come off the back of an innovator asking themselves a question that their predecessor didn't. And so the power of questions have traveled with me through my life, as you've probably experienced over the last hour. I responded to
Yeah,
so many different types of questions, be it
yeah.
questions from my social workers, questions from my care worker, questions from my foster mother, questions from the church, questions from anyone and everyone, questions from young people to me as an old man. Questions can impact you and change your life, especially if the right question is asked at the right time in the right way by the right person. And so the power of questions is unquestionable. And about a couple of years ago, I had a friend who passed away, unfortunately, and left me with a lot of questions like, how can I honor my friend? I couldn't believe that my friend had gone to the grave and not be able to answer another question from his children, or have his children experience him asking a question. So I had this eureka moment in wanting to honor my friend, where I said, if I could create a bit of technology that allowed us to record our questions, and those questions then can be responded to by anyone in the world at any time in the world, that I think could be quite a powerful platform. And that platform became Qcast. So Qcast works in that different people record a number of questions. They can record one question or a series of questions that are put together into a circular video format. Other people can come along, click respond on that video format, and record themselves being interviewed by that questioner.
Sure.
So it's basically a way for people to record, conversations in responses to questions that can then go on to share insight with other people. So you could have a social worker ask a series of questions to a young people, or young people ask social workers a series of questions as a Qcast, and then a social worker can come along and record responses, and that young person gets the insight given by that social worker and then can share that on social media, can share that internally. You can basically have a personal, confidential Qcast workspace where it's just like a WhatsApp group, private WhatsApp group that you have conversations in, or you can do it publicly and have it on a social media platform.
I've joined the platform, and I've not yet mastered all these bits and pieces that it can do, but I absolutely love that concept. And even in terms of the story of its origins, I think is pretty moving. Your story, Shabazz, about the origins of the concept.
Thank you.
As I mentioned to you before, I work with a lot of students who are into research, and I think this would be a great platform for them to become involved in.
Amazing.
Because you're absolutely right. The right question at the right time can be absolutely transformational. You were also teaching me a little before we came on about aesthetic distancing, which I kind of feel Qcast enables one to do that, to give a thoughtful response as opposed to an instant one, which, let's be honest, a lot of the stuff that we're into on social media is about spontaneity, instant responses, sometimes a lot of crap. But tell us a bit about aesthetic distancing, because I think I'm not the only one who didn't know about it.
Thank you for the question. So before I even answer that question, the bigger picture and goal for Qcast is we want this to be an ethical based platform. There's too much polarization and manipulation in technology, where a lot of the kind of content on a lot of social media platforms are quite superficial. And anger and outrage becomes monetized because some of these big tech platforms, they thrive on people arguing or asking silly, not silly questions, but asking things that are trivial. Qcast, we want to be different. We want to actually raise the conversation and the level of insight to it being ethical and it being helpful, beneficial, transformative. So that's our desire. And a friend of mine who's a counselor and psychologist told me about aesthetic distancing, how a counselor at times might ask a question to a client and someone that they're seeing, but rather than rush for an answer, would actually give the client time to answer the question. Might even say, come back next week at our next session and respond to the question I've asked you today. And that process of remuneration or rumination where
Yes,
you're
rumination.
think,
Yeah, that's one.
where you're
Yeah.
thinking about a question, and the question's staying with you, and you're not rushed to give this immediate
Mm-hmm.
response, which,
Mm-hmm.
any of us that are rushed to give an immediate response to any question, not all the time are we going to give the best level of insight.
Mm-hmm.
And we kick ourselves afterwards because we're like, why did I answer the question like that? Well, you were put on the spot, and so you were given, you were rushed to give an answer, and you gave the wrong answer. But with aesthetic distancing, if you take your time and you answer in your own time, you answer when you're ready, and because sometimes the deep insight that we have within us, we might need a day or two, or an hour or two,
Yeah,
or a week
yeah, for that to surface. Yeah.
for it to surface.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
so questions are seen as catalysts. You ask someone a good question, it's a catalyst for the insight that a person has inside them. But you sometimes need to give them aesthetic distance in a time to basically make the answer to that question come to the surface.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Qcast is a good technical and practical way for that process to occur.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. And any of my students who are listening, take that one on board. Take that one on board. Wow.
Love it.
Okay, so that sounds absolutely brilliant, Shabazz, and I certainly hope to be more and more engaged in the platform, because I do think it's a brilliant idea.
Someone like you, I'm honored that you think that way on the platform, because you have so much insight to bring to a platform like Qcast. So I look forward to
I
seeing
jolly
how
well
you.
hope so. I jolly well hope so.
100%. You're a questionologist. You're someone who's, bread and butter is in asking great questions, and so
Yes, yes, I try. I
100%.
try. Um, I don't think that we can end this interview. I mean, I absolutely don't think this is our last conversation, but I do want us to give a little shout out to Candy and her work,
Of course.
because I can see it's racking up again.
Yeah.
Candy, of course, is your wife. What's happening on that score? Because you're also very involved in her work too.
Amazing.
So tell us a
No,
bit about that collaboration.
thank you. So yes, to those who don't know, so my wife is also an entrepreneur. She's my mentor as well as an entrepreneur. I take so much
You
from
need
her.
it, man. You need it. You need it. You need
Absolutely.
it.
So she basically has an organization and a movement really called Cultural Style Week. Cultural Style Week, and her vision is that throughout a week in the month, sorry, throughout a week in the year,
Mhm.
May the 21st to the 27th, she's basically encouraging people around the world to wear something cultural that can celebrate their heritage, celebrate their background, celebrate their cultural style, and then basically share it on social media, tag it with #cultural style week. And the powerful thing with this movement, as you've seen, Sylvia, is it's got people asking and answering great questions
Mhm.
of each other about their cultural differences and sometimes their cultural similarities. You'll have a Scottish man with Madras or plaid on his what's it called again?
The kilt. The kilt.
On the kilt, sorry. um, and speaking to, as you know, Jennifer, who's wearing the similar version of that same
Yeah.
pattern,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
from the Caribbean,
Caribbean. Yeah. Yeah.
and then comparing differences about the different types of similarities and where the history of that might come from. And
Mhm.
so Cultural Style Week is a beautiful movement that is encouraged, to bring inclusion and diversity and conversation around our similarities as well as our differences, and to celebrate them all together.
Mhm.
I always tell
Mhm.
people you can go to an African wedding and everyone's wearing African attire. You can go to a Scottish wedding and everyone's wearing kilts and different Scottish attire. But when you go to a Cultural Style Week event, and there are a number of events happening throughout the Cultural Style Week itself, you'll see people from all different ethnicities,
Mm.
all different cultural styles. A Japanese lady in a kimono speaking to an African man in an agbada, and someone from the Middle East speaking to someone from, the UK in a suit, comparing differences and celebrating one another's different cultural styles. So it's a powerful dynamic movement. And this year there are a number of different key events happening, not just in the UK, but happening in Leeds. Sorry, not just happening in London, happening in Leeds,
Mhm.
happening in South Africa, in the Netherlands, different events and pop-ups that are occurring. You can go to culturalstyleweek.com to find out more about the information. But yeah, it's a phenomenal movement that I'm so proud of my wife about 100%.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you guys sort of working together in terms of that whole initiative. I'll also put that link in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And your vision is just infinite when you think about what potentially these movements can achieve. So very, very proud of everything you're doing. Listen, Shabazz, I know you're a busy man. What are you working on at the moment? What's going on for you at the moment?
So we have a number of different organizations.
You always have a number of things going on.
So yeah, so at the moment there's a big event taking place in November that we're speaking to, called Anthropy. We're speaking to them about using Qcast as a way. Anthropy is a big event that takes place in the Eden Project in Cornwall, where they have hundreds of different leaders. Mayor Sadiq Khan was there last year, a number of members of parliament. They come together and they talk about how, they're basically speaking about the vision for Britain, how we can make a better, inclusive Britain over the next 30 years. And off the back of that event, they left with 4 powerful questions, questions about how to actually change the vision of Britain. And so Qcast, basically, we're speaking to them at the moment about Qcast being empowered to help with that level of engagement, to share those questions with the rest of the world. So that's something we're excited about, the Anthropy project taking place in November.
Okay.
And on top of that, we're speaking to a number of universities and members of parliament about using Qcast to help with engagement in those organizations.
Yeah, watch this space, eh?
Yeah,
watch this space. My brain's doing overtime in terms of its use in education and research.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there's some stuff going on in my head.
I love it. I love this. When I speak to anyone and they understand how the platform works in its practical sense,
yeah,
I love seeing people think, actually it can be used in this area, that area, this area, because edutech or education or technology in education is huge for us, because it's all about questions, right? Not just as well questions, say, from a lecturer to a student, but questions from the student about the lecture back to the lecturer.
Absolutely.
How many times does a student leave and think, I didn't understand what that meant, and they go, forget about it. But if they had the ability to record a question into an app that went to the lecturer would more than be willing to answer and respond to that student and say,
we hope.
Yeah.
A miserable lot they are. Yeah.
True. Well, good teachers, you know what I mean? Those that have the time in it. But yeah, the vision of Qcast, very simply, and I'll end with this, is it's just to bring the actual level of conversation to the fore, so that people who aren't speaking at the moment are able to conversate and speak. And if social media or technology can bring that to the table, then it kind of, you know what I mean, it proves its worth as a commodity that can help bring about more harmony within society, which is a huge thing that we need right now. So that's our vision and goal. Definitely.
Lovely. Absolutely brilliant. Well, listen, Shabazz, thank you so much for spending a little time with us today. And no doubt I can, well, if you can provide me with some links that I can include in the show notes so people can follow your work and what you're doing, all your socials, etc. That would be brilliant. Very proud of what you're doing, sir. And, you take good care.
Thank you.
And see you soon.
See you soon, Sylvia. Thank you so much.